Okay, so here is our recap for the week of, it was April 27th to May 1st. So on Monday, you guys learned about the menstrual cycle. I know that it was probably one of your favorite topics so far in our course. But so the menstrual cycle is a sequence of events that take about 28 days. It starts off with the release of the follicle stimulating hormone, and then it basically ends with a drop in hormones that signals your body to send out those hormones again. So it's literally a cycle that continues on and on every 28 days. So it consists of the production of and release of 4 different types of hormones and the release of an egg which travels through the female reproductive system. So if the egg is unfertilized, it's going to be released from the body through a process called menstruation, which you guys would know the common terminology there is the period. So there's a nice little short one here. So then on Tuesday, you guys should have learned about human development. And so this one here is where we're talking about what happens when an egg is fertilized. So we're looking at the process of childbirth. I'm hoping that some of you kind of had some like eye-opening moments. You're like, oh my God, childbirth is not an easy thing. It's very taxing on a female's body. And especially that process when you're in labor and that big child is being born, holy cow. But I guess we'll get there. So if an egg is not fertilized, it gets released from the body through menstruation. And then if it is fertilized, then a fetus will start to develop in the female body. So fertilization begins when a haploid egg is joined by a haploid sperm to become a diploid zygote. So this structure of an egg helps to develop the baby. So just to go back, the haploid egg, remember that just means that the egg cell itself only has half the number of chromosomes. And then so when the two join together, you have a full set. Sorry, was there a question?
No, I think that was just some feedback.
Oh, just some feedback? Okay, for sure. I couldn't hear any, I just heard some like mumbles. I'm like, okay, so the moment the egg and sperm join is called conception. So that is when the egg is considered fertilized. So what happens here is that if we're just going to kind of go back, and this even recaps a little bit of what we talked about last week, is at first the egg is going to start off in the ovary, and then then it's going to be released from that follicle, and then it's going to be pushed off into your fallopian tubes, where that in itself is where the egg will be fertilized, provided there is some sperm in that area to fertilize it. So once it becomes fertilized, that is after considered on your day 1 is where it's considered a zygote. So that is a fertilized egg, and it only consists of a single cell. On the second day, it goes through a special form of mitotic cell division where it splits off into 2 cells. And at that point, it is officially then called the embryo. Then it goes through that special type of mitotic cell division for a number of days until by day 5, you'll get to something called the blastocyst, which is essentially like I don't know if you want to call it like a hollow ball. I guess that's the kind of shape that we can kind of call it. But that blastocyst is going to then move through the fallopian tube, and it'll attach itself to this endometrium wall, which is part of that lining in your uterus. So when that blastocyst attaches to that uterine wall or the endometrium, that is when we consider it to be implantation. Okay. So this here is where the placenta and the embryo start to develop. All right. So an embryo is referred to as a fetus, and it is about 8 or 9 weeks after conception. And sorry, we'll put in 8 or 9 weeks after conception. So I think a common question that you guys may have, or maybe you didn't and hopefully you do now, is what's the difference between an embryo and a fetus? So really it's the gestational period, or the term, or I guess the amount of time that it's spent in the mother's womb. And there's 2 different kind of processes that are happening in an embryo and in the fetus. So with the embryo, that is where your main organs are going to be forming, like the brain and the heart. And whereas when it reaches fetus stage, that's where it's kind of doing some of its fine-tunes, development, where it's really preparing then the fetus for, or the offspring for, to live out in the real world. So a lot of the major stuff happens in those early weeks for some of the development. And that's not to say that, the heart stops growing or the brain stops growing. This is where some of that, that very vital, necessary stuff starts to happen, although it'll continue to grow throughout that birthing, or I guess throughout the pregnancy, and even then some of the organs will still develop after the baby is born. So an embryo is typically around fertilization to about 9 weeks, and then 9 weeks up until the birth, the offspring will be called a fetus. So this whole process actually takes about 9 months, we say approximately. We all know it's usually plus or minus a couple days, and for some people, they're even either born really early. I was a premature baby. I was born, I think, just about, I think it was a month before my mom's due date. My brother was, I think, 3 months. His was a bit more severe. But doctors can just really do estimates at this point. Mm-hmm. And so the official beginning of the birthing process is not 100% known to scientists right now. But we do know that there are some common signs that, people, females know when they're going into labor. Usually it's through some sort of contractions, which is the release of the hormone oxytocin, and the release of the amniotic fluid, which is that fluid in the womb, which we know as your water breaking. So this next part here is where I kind of thought might be a little bit interesting, is that basically as you go through labor, the cervix is going to dilate, which means it's going to, I guess it's able to expand and I guess withstand a little bit more wiggle room in there, but but it is so the cervix can dilate approximately up to 10 centimeters, which is, I mean, you got to fit the size of a baby through your female reproductive system. So, I mean, you're looking at maybe something probably about maybe this big. So, I mean, the female body is kind of amazing that it can push out a baby like that through what we would normally consider a small opening. So, I mean, kudos to the female body. So if anything, I mean, it is a painful process for some people. They actually, some doctors will even cut your opening down there, just to give you a little bit more room for the baby to come out. So, I mean, it's not a pleasant process. I mean, the miracle of childbirth and, the fact that we can make more humans is just amazing. But it is not an easy process. It's the whole time, it's very taxing on a female's body, and especially leading up to the labor itself. That is probably, I don't know if that would be maybe arguably the most painful part of the whole process. And there's so many changes that happen as well. I've had friends who have gotten gestational diabetes from her pregnancy, and I mean, it was gone the day, right after birth, diabetes gone. It was crazy, but it does so many changes to your body. So hopefully you have a bit of an appreciation for the female body, but also know that wait to have sex until you're prepared to go through this kind of a process, because it's not easy. There's a lot you got to prepare for, and a lot that you're going to go through. So please think twice before doing any hanky-panky with your partner. All right, so moving on. So when the baby's born, it has to come out head first. Part of it is because of that breathing process that the baby does need to be able to take out that first breath of air when it is coming out of the womb. So it could suffocate. And also when it comes out head first, the head itself is kind of slightly reformed a little bit. So it might be a little bit more elongated. So that won't necessarily happen if the baby came out feet first. So that one there is where is where the baby is called breached. There also could be some other complications as well, but those are just the two main ones that we're going to talk about. So if the baby is breached or something else is happening where you cannot go through a natural childbirth, there is the option of a cesarean section, which is a C-section. So this is a type of surgery where a doctor is going to cut into the female's abdomen walls and remove out the baby that way, rather than pushing it out through the female reproductive system through your labits. Okay. So there is the most simplified version of childbirth, if I can throw that out your way. Know that it is a little bit more complicated, but there's a McMurtry 5-minute version, and the grade 9 version. Okay, and then the last thing that we talked about was contraceptives. So a contraceptive is it can be a chemical, a tool, a device. It's typically, if you have a device or a tool, it's usually injecting some sort of chemical into you, and it's used to prevent pregnancies. And I guess in itself can even be help to prevent some STIs as well, depending on which sort of contraceptive you're working with. But they're mainly to prevent the pregnancies. So as you guys should have read in that PowerPoint that I included, is that contraceptives are not 100% guaranteed to prevent pregnancies. They gave you some statistics. I just took a screenshot of the slide here, but even say if you were to go through a sterilization process where you get your tubes tied, there are still errors in those surgeries. So they saw that there were still people who became pregnant with their partners despite having these surgeries and despite using things like IUDs or oral contraceptives like the pill. So it's not 100% guaranteed. So that's also another reason why you need to make sure that, even though you might be having protected sex, it's not even 100% guaranteed to work. Whether or not it was from a misuse of the item, or I guess device or pill or chemical that you're using that was prescribed by your doctor, or maybe you bought condoms at the store, but they're not guaranteed. And even then, we have some stats here with the perfect use. Even with perfect use, it's not 100% guaranteed to stop or to prevent those pregnancies. So you have to be very careful with that, okay? And that's not to say that if you're gonna, if you have protected sex, the chances, you don't have, it's not high chances. I mean, I think this was 1 person out of every 1,000, but I mean, the possibility is still there, right? Mm-hmm. So it is really important to make sure that if you guys are using any type of contraceptives, make sure you follow the directions, whether or not it was from your doctor, or if it was something that you bought at the store, follow directions on that package to at least ensure, or I guess shrink that chance of you getting pregnant, okay, or your partner pregnant. So just like it's not 100% guaranteed to prevent pregnancies, same thing goes with your sexually transmitted infections or your STIs. And so this one here is once again just another little screenshot of the PowerPoint. So as you see here, most of your contraceptives don't actually protect against STIs. They would, I think this one here is, they have the female condom would, male condoms, if they are latex condoms, would as well. And then some sponge and spermicides and some diaphragm and cervical caps will as well, but they are limited. And even then, when we put that yes, they did put that little asterisk beside the yes, because even then it's still not a perfect, the system's still not perfect. There's still that chance that it could happen. So, it's recommended. I would say definitely the condom and the male and female condom would probably be your best bet, because, it reduces your risk of an STI. And if you look back at your stats here, it has the one of the lower chances of ending up in pregnancy as well. I'm just trying to look here. So yeah, this is sterilization. This is where you no longer want to have your kids. Oh yeah, your condoms here. Actually, the condoms here are quite high actually in terms of your pregnancy rate. But I would say that they are best for your for preventing STIs. So okay. So that actually marks off the end of our biology unit. We started off with some really kind of interesting things about cell division, and then we ended off with childbirth. Who would have thought it would have kind of come in this direction? I'm proud of you guys for going through that. I can't imagine that was easy for some of you. I know some of us are very uncomfortable with the subject, but it is really great, not only for the awareness, but the appreciation of the human body. And so good job for getting through that.